ever since Steve Jobs trash-talked the Dell Inspiron laptop in 2001, Dell has been trying to be more and more like Apple so that they can beat them at their own game. Nowadays, they don't even try to hide it. And they completely ripped off MacBook's marketing strategy by introducing the Dell, Dell Pro, and Dell Pro Max, with additional subcategories under each, so I could get a Dell Pro Max Plus. Before Dell went with that, they had the XPS brand as part of the Dell lineup for ultra-premium home computers, which were often nicknamed as the Windows MacBook, or as some repair technicians call it, the expensive piece of charcuterie. You see, the thing about Dell is that quality and reliability is all over the place and very inconsistent. Somehow, they are able to sell some of the worst plastic pieces of junk you ever laid your hands on, while also making some of the most excellently durable and reliable laptops. This is the Dell XPS 7590, and in my opinion, this is one of the best Dell XPSs ever made. The design of this laptop is timeless and has been used from 2015 up to 2020. One of the reasons I say this model is one of the best is because it shares the same chassis as the Dell Precision 5540, which is classified as a mobile workstation business computer. Businesses have pretty high standards when it comes to the durability of laptops, so if this is what businesses get, you know that the engineering behind it is several levels above their consumer laptops. And it really shows. The build quality and materials are of the highest quality, with solid metal covers and zero flex when picking it up. This is also one of the last Dell XPS models to have standard USB-A ports and HDMI, because the next year they removed that in favor of only having USB-C ports, just like the MacBook Pro did. The XPS 7590 isn't without its flaws. When it was new, it would get pretty hot. They were trying to cram a lot of performance in a slim package. Over time, after several updates to the BIOS and Dell Power Manager, they were able to get it to run at a reasonable temperature with the Dell optimization tool. To give this laptop the best chance, I decided to take it apart and redo the thermal paste. Taking it apart was pretty easy. I just needed to remove all the torque screws at the bottom, and also the one underneath the cover. After that, the lid came right off. Right away, I can tell that the inside of this thing is not very Mac-like. I see that it has upgradable RAM slots and a removable NVMe SSD, unlike the MacBook Pro from the same year. Before doing any work, I made sure to first disconnect the battery. Then, I could remove the screws and pull off the heatsink. After that, I could see that there were some clumps of dust at the fans. After cleaning those out and the heatsink fins, I cleaned off the old thermal paste from the heatsink and the CPU and GPU. I also added some new thermal pads to the VRAM, as well as some new thermal paste. After that, I plugged the battery back in. And before I close this laptop back up, I'd just like to point out that this charging port here is modular, which is a good thing because if it gets damaged, then you can replace it with a new charging port pretty easily. If I look at the other side, we see that we got a killer Wi-Fi card, and it actually says that on the label. The Intel Killer 1650X card is crazy fast and has a maximum data bandwidth of 2.4 gigabits per second, which is faster than the fastest cable-based internet available, which is 1.2 gigabits per second. I put the lid back on and decided to test this thing out with some gaming. While this laptop is not advertised as a gaming laptop, considering that this has an i7-9750H, an NVIDIA GTX 1650, and 32 gigabytes of RAM, this thing is quite capable of gaming at 1080p. One of the biggest downsides is that the screen refresh rate is at 60 Hz, so some super competitive gamers who want more than 60 FPS might want to look at other options. After running the game for a while, looking at Open Hardware Monitor, I can see that the CPU temperature occasionally would reach above 90 Celsius, but mostly stays within the range of the high 70s and low 80s when running Forza Horizon 5 at medium settings. I would say that this is a pretty good temperature range to be at, and I've used other high-performance laptops that would often reach 100 degrees Celsius and start thermal throttling. While this thing is able to play Forza pretty smoothly, other games are not as smooth, such as Cyberpunk 2077, which is playable in low settings, but does not have a perfect 60 FPS at the full resolution. But I probably could improve the performance if I decrease the output resolution. Elden Ring is also playable, but it is also not the smoothest FPS. Both of these games are pretty intensive games, so just being able to play these games all on a laptop this thin is an accomplishment on its own. I would say the Dell XPS 7590 is an excellent value for the money as a used 5-year-old laptop you could pick up for $300 to $400 on eBay. If you compare a brand new laptop in the same price range, such as the Asus E510 for $379, you can see that this new Asus has a Celeron N4020, which is a low-end processor from 2019. The XPS 7590 also has a processor from 2019, but it's much higher performance, and also comes with more RAM, higher resolution screen, much better graphics, and a much better build quality. One thing that surprised me about this laptop is that the battery life was actually pretty decent. When I tested it for basic web browsing in energy saver mode, it could actually get about 6 hours of battery life, assuming I don't try to use it for gaming or other high-end CPU tasks. Since this is an older laptop, one thing to consider is that eventually the battery will go bad, as every laptop battery in every laptop will eventually go bad. Fortunately, it's not too difficult to replace the battery with a brand new one when it eventually does. And I would say this device is definitely worth putting the money into, whereas the Asus is not, in my opinion. If you liked this video, consider checking out some of my other content and see if there's something else you like. Bye-bye!